What is up, people? It is the BetSided Daily Betslip for Wednesday. Ben Heisler, Donnavan Smoot. Good to have the gang back together again. We got a Stanley Cup final. We got game 4 between the Lightning and the Avalanche. We will, of course, break it down in our game of the night. Make sure, by the way, that if you guys are hanging out with us, whether it be on YouTube or on Twitter at BetSided, that you go ahead and vote on our poll for who you think is going to be your best bet, whether it be the Lightning or the Avalanche on the money line, or the total over under 6. Donovan, we've got some early votes in, and just maybe, I don't want to jinx it, but for the first time in the show's relatively short history, we might, for the first time, have some action from the team, from the community on a total, regardless of the sport. If that happens, it might be worth celebrating tonight.
It's about time. It's about time. We've been doing this for, even though they're short, been doing it for a minute now. So I'm not, we like, both of our faces lit up because we couldn't believe that that it finally came through. So I'm excited to see where the community's going.
I think it's great. Like, we were just so excited about it. Like, Is this actually happening?
Yeah.
Could it be? Like, yeah, you bet. This is legit. And so we're excited to see how the ultimate poll results turn out. So make sure you guys head on over to either Twitter or YouTube to watch. We'll, of course, dive into our best bets. We got several in Major League Baseball tonight, as well as each of us having a play on the lone WNBA game of the night. We're going to take a look, Donovan, at the AL Central, because right now you got a log jam at the top between the Cleveland Guardians moving their way up into first place, up against the Minnesota Twins, and the Chicago White Sox, still under 500, got their asses kicked pretty well again today at home by the Toronto Blue Jays, but the odds makers haven't given up on them yet. So we will go through all three of those teams, give you our determination on which of those three teams is the best bet to come out of the AL Central. So plenty of exciting stuff on the course of today's show. But can we talk about not really a bad beat, but just if you had an Aces ticket last night, watching a 28-point lead from the best team in the WNBA. And you and I, of course, we do our daily WNBA best bets column over at BetSided. Man, imagine checking in on the game. You see it's on CBS Sports Network. All right, Chicago Sky, Las Vegas Aces. It's a top 3 matchup in the league. And the Aces are up 28 points in the first quarter. They score 41 on a good Chicago Sky defense. You're thinking to yourself, okay, the Aces came to play today. And then what happened? They gave it all away, blew a 28-point lead. It's the largest comeback in WNBA history. And kaput, if you had an Aces -8 or -8.5 bet from the other night, Donovan, it just completely evaporated. Was that more of a choke job, you think, by the Aces? Was that just good quality comeback from the Sky? And if you're a bettor, how do you even go back to the Aces at this point? I know they're the best team in the league, but that's about as bad of a burn as you can get.
Yeah. One, anytime you blow anything, I think anything 25 and up, it's always a choke job. I don't think you can, like, there's no way around it. That's
your
always
magic numbers, 25.
Yeah, 25. That's always a choke job. And then, if you want to go back to the Aces, like you said, they're the best team in the league. It sucks to say, but like, it be like that sometimes. Like, stuff like this happens. You don't expect it all the time, because obviously they're the best team in the league. But no, that has to be tragic though. And it has to be like those fans who leave the game early because they're trying to like beat traffic because they already know what's going to happen, and then they get, like, they're driving home, they may turn on the radio or something just to check in on the game, and now it's like, we're going into double overtime. How did I miss this? And it's
what happened? I don't understand.
Exactly. And so I'm still in shock. The fact that you can have both like 41 points in the first quarter and have, like, I think it was a franchise record in points for first quarter, and have that level of history on one end, and then leave the game with the other side of the spectrum in history in terms of the largest, blown lead in WNBA history is absolutely insane. The swing in it is just crazy.
Yes. I think you brought up the word tragic, and I'm like, that's a perfect word to describe what just happened, especially if you are on the Aces side. So I'm right there with you. Just an absolutely brutal beat. Before we get into our best bets of the night, and we do have one from our great community to dive into as well. Have you ever left a game early that all of a sudden it completely changed the perspective either you left early and then the team that you were rooting for lost, or vice versa, you thought your team had it in the bag and then you left and then you realized that you watched your team completely choke it away? Do you think to yourself, man, if I was just in my same seat, I could have prevented this? Has that ever happened to you?
I think one time when I was little, my dad had taken me to a Lakers Rockets game,
Okay.
and I think the Rockets ended up they were up by like 20 or 20 something, around that 25 number. And I think we like left early, and I remember driving home in that same situation where we turn on the radio, and all of a sudden like the Lakers start coming back, and they do all this, and all of a sudden it's like a close game. And I just remember being so mad because that was my first time, and I think only time seeing Kobe. And so I was so upset because we missed the end of it. But I think that's the only time where I've left a game, because normally I stay until the very end. I think that's the only time I've ever left a game early.
Oh wow. So you've always been stick around, deal with the traffic. Because I came from a family that loved to leave early for games. And I don't recall any specific moment where we completely saw a victory get snatched out of my team's hands or vice versa. But I do remember that when I was 10 years old, I had to go to the bathroom at Wrigley Field, and my dad was like, "Yeah, but Sammy Sosa's coming up," and it was the year of the great home run chase. And Sosa had already hit 2 home runs in that game. And I was like, "Oh, come on, it'll be really fast." And of course, there was a long line, and we missed Sosa's 3rd home run of the game because his 10-year-old son had to go potty.
Once again, the apt word is tragic.
What will be tragic is when it happens to me as a father coming up in the next like
full circle.
7 to 8 years.
Full circle.
Yes, it'll be a complete full circle, and I will have seen it coming from a mile away, and I'll just have to live with the consequences, because when your kid has to go, you got to go. You can't. You got to be able to do what you need to do in that regard. All right. So with that being said, an awkward transition into best bets of the night, going from the bathroom to hopefully a better place where hopefully your bets do not go tonight. You have 2 plays in Major League Baseball, both props. I have a prop as well as a play. So tell me who you like, because I know that you have one game in particular that you are focused on for this evening.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the Giants-Braves game, and I think that this is actually going to be a little bit of a pitching duel. We have Charlie Morton versus Carlos Rodon, and I'm going to go with the over for both of them. So I'm going to start with Morton. I'm going to take the over on his strikeouts, 6.5 strikeouts plus 112. So I like this a lot because Morton, he's cleared this line fairly easily in his last 3 games. He's gotten off to a hot start in June. And one of the things that I really like is that even though that the Giants for the season are fairly average in the league in terms of strikeout rate, in their last 3 games, they have the 5th worst strikeout rate in all of baseball. And even though it's a short sample size, 2 of those games are against the Braves. So they clearly feel like they have an advantage at the plate over Atlanta, but it's just not working out. They're being really aggressive, and the swings are just not connecting right now. And so I think that with Morton, clearing this line, and him having a hot hand, I'm going to ride the hot hand there. And then on the other side, Rodon over, I'm going to go with his over as well, over 7.5 strikeouts minus 120. It's kind of the same logic. I'm going to ride the hot hand here as well, because even though that the Braves, and they've gone on this amazing run, they've gotten themselves back into the playoff picture. The one weird flaw is that they have the worst strikeout rate when they're playing at home. Right, they have the worst strikeout rate in the league when they're at home. It's at 26%, and Rodon is one of the best strikeout pitchers in the game. He's cleared this line in his last 2 games, and so the same logic that I had with Morton, I'm going to ride the hot hand, and I'm going to back this trend of Atlanta not being able to get out of their own way whenever they're playing at home. So I'm going to take the over for both of these pitchers.
So let's start with Rodon, since you just mentioned him. He's always been a terrific strikeout artist. And if you look at the actual slate tonight, the only guy that averages more strikeouts per 9 innings, I take that back. There's actually 2. Shohei Ohtani of the Angels and Lucas Giolito of the White Sox. Those are the only 2 guys. Rodon is 3rd. He's averaging 11.22 strikeouts per 9 innings, Walk rate's a little bit high, but he's done a great job of keeping the ball in the ballpark. He's just been up and down. And right now you got Rodon back on the up. Last 3 games for him, 8 innings, 8 strikeouts. Previous game against the Dodgers, 8 strikeouts in 6 innings. When he can be efficient like he was against Pittsburgh, I mean, Rodon's going to be able to make it super easy, but he's a high effort guy almost all the time. A couple games before that, he only had 5 and 6, but he only went 9 innings combined in both of those games. Charlie Morton scares me a little bit more. I'll be honest. I like the Rodon play a little bit more than the Morton play. Now, I know that I just mentioned, okay, if a guy's pitching well, you ride the hot hand a little bit, and the Giants are striking out a ton. But I do worry a little bit that Morton has just taken a little bit longer to get figured out or to figure things out this year. Most of the year, he's really struggled. And I know that the strikeout rate isn't bad, but his ERA is around 5. He's given up a bunch of home runs this year. Unless he's figured out something, and his last start against Chicago was great, but that Chicago team, Donovan, is not particularly good. And the Giants offense, certainly much better. So that's where it scares me a little bit with Morton. But the strikeout numbers in particular, I think it's a reasonable number to hit.
Yeah. And listen, I understand that, that Morton, he's had a little bit of issues keeping the ball inside the park. And I actually faded him in terms of our daily dinger. I think that he's going to give up one tonight, but I also think that you can come back and still have a whole bunch of strikeouts. And if you look at the last 3 games, he had 9 strikeouts against the Cubs. He had 12 strikeouts against Pittsburgh, and he had 8 strikeouts against the Rockies. And so you have a blueprint in terms of how he's been playing it in June that kind of says, hey, he can come in and clear this line, and he's cleared this line by at least 1 strike.
Yeah, I think it's a reasonable call.
Getting right. It's not like he's just getting over the hook. He has a little bit of separation. So that's why I'm like, that's why I have a little bit more faith in riding the hot hand, rather if it was just 7 strikeouts, 7 strikeouts, 7 strikeouts.
Yeah, I think that makes plenty of sense, because when he is on, he can absolutely clear that number fairly easily. Where I'm going with this game is actually not on either side of the pitching props. The Giants are my underdog of the day. I really like them quite a bit. They're plus 122 right now over at WinBet on the road against the Braves. A bit surprising to me, considering that they're an underdog. I know that Atlanta's played exceptionally well, but I think they have the better pitcher on the mound. And, our Joe Summers did a great job of highlighting this over at BetSided, and Matt DeCero did as well in his game preview. Rodon in the month of June has a 1.17 ERA. Over the last 2 starts, he's thrown 14 scoreless innings. He's only allowed 4 hits, and he struck out 16 batters. He's been an elite level pitcher, even though he had a few rough goes in the month of May. And one of them, I think, kind of moves all of his numbers around. That was the Sunday night game where he just got absolutely rocked. I think only went maybe about 2 2/3 innings in that game. As for Charlie Morton, yes, he's coming off a fantastic start. Yes, the strikeout numbers are there. However, he's given up 4 runs in 4 consecutive starts. He's allowed a home run in 6 straight outings prior to last week. And there's also some wind blowing out, and Morton is a very much fly ball pitcher. So you have a lot of factors going up against him. And I think the Giants, yes, they have struck out quite a bit, but they've also been the second best team in baseball in walk rate. It's part of the reason that I was intrigued by them and faded Spencer Strider last night. And while, again, Morton has looked good as of late, I just question whether or not, striking out 9 Chicago Cubs and blanking them is something that we should really be proud of. So maybe the strikeout number is there. In fact, I hope it is there, so that both of those bets and both of those props hit for you. But I do think the Giants, as an underdog on the road with the better pitcher on the mound and the hotter pitcher on the mound, sign me up yesterday.
Yeah, I think that's a very reasonable take. And if we're talking about the Giants and who's going to win the pitching matchup, another thing with Rodon is that if he's gonna go and have like a classic Rodon start where he's going 6 and 2/3 or even get to 7, and he's on the mound for a majority of the game, kind of controlling the game, I really like that Giants pick.
So that's my one pick as far as a play for Major League Baseball. The other one that I have on the board is a prop tonight. And let's go to the red hot Cleveland Guardians, a team that we're going to mention a little bit later on in the show today. Tristan McKenzie is in a really, really nice spot tonight. And I know that I mentioned, Mike Clevenger as a play that I liked a little bit earlier on, but McKenzie over the last several games has been rock solid, very consistent. And his strikeout prop right now is at a really reasonable number. It's only at 5. This is somebody that's going deep into games for Cleveland. Looking over some of his recent performances, he's gone 6+ innings, gone 7. McKenzie is one of those guys right now that is one of the more reliable options in the rotation. He's got a 2.96 ERA. I know that there could be some potential regression coming because that his fielder independent pitching, Donovan, is up near 4.37, but he goes deep into games and he gives himself a nice opportunity. The last time that he's pitched less than 6 innings in a game, you have to go all the way back to April 26th when he only April 20th, when he only went 4 1/3 innings against the White Sox. It's been either 6 or 7+ in every single game. And he's also hit this prop in 3 of his last 4. So he looks to me like somebody against the Twins that, again, can be a bit more of a free swinging team. And with the Guardians playing as well as they are right now, I expect him to hit this number in now 4 out of 5 consecutive games. So 5 at -115. If your book has it at 5.5 with plus odds, I think both of those numbers are really good because I expect around 7 strikeouts from McKenzie tonight against a free swinging Twins team.
This game is going to be super interesting because, we're going to talk about these teams later on in the show. And it's going to be very funny because I can't wait for one of us to say, like, oh, don't trust this team. And then they're going to come out and they're going to have a great. And so I think that, for the rest of the season, once you start getting these matches between like the Guardians and the Twins or the White Sox, all of these AL Central divisional games are going to be super, super intriguing to see who comes out on the other side with the win in terms of these series. So I like it though, and I like the McKenzie pick a lot.
All right, so we got our 2 MLB props out of the way. Let's go to our Twitter bet of the day, and this came in, of course, from our guy Cody Wells. He likes the under on 0.5 hits for Randy Arozarena of the Tampa Bay Rays at +145. So he's going back to the underwell today. Arozarena is 2 for his last 25. 3 for 17 lifetime with 7 strikeouts and 2 walks against Jordan Montgomery. Not putting the ball in play is crucial. Yeah, again, anytime you're going up against the Yankees, you know that you have to be able to make your opportunities at the plate count because they are going to score runs. And especially with somebody who has struggled against the starting pitcher and struggled in general, 2 for his last 25. Hard to argue. I know that he's a quality player, Donovan, and this is somebody that broke out in the World Series a couple of years ago. But man, I think at plus money here, knowing that you're going to fail most of the time, have to back Cody on this. I really like that line, especially for Randy Arozarena tonight.
I like it too, and we talk about all the time. Anytime Cody comes on with the play, he always got the numbers to back it up. Yeah, so it's always fire. He always has the numbers to back it up. So I'm rocking with it.
All right. Speaking of numbers to back it up, you and I are we have different bets for the lone game in the WNBA tonight. You have the Connecticut Sun 10-point favorites against the Liberty over at WinBet. Total in this game a bit on the higher side over at WinBet. I was actually a bit surprised. Had it at 162 earlier today. But with regards to this game, it's actually gone up. It's now at 163. So with that being said, give me your best bet on tonight's WNBA match, a little tri-state rivalry between the Liberty and the Sun. Who do you like?
I'm going to go with the Sun -10 here. I think that they cover and kind of win big tonight against New York. The Liberty, they're coming off. So both teams are actually coming off of losses, but the Liberty, they're coming off of that, very tough loss to the Seattle Storm. Sue Bird was able to put them away with that dagger 3. I think that if we're looking at the WNBA and we see Las Vegas being the top team, there's kind of like a fight and a scrum to see who's number 2. In my opinion, I think Connecticut is clearly the second best team in the WNBA. If you look at the numbers across the board, it's insane. So they're 6th in pace. They're not a running gun team, but they're still 1st in net rating. They're 4th in defensive rating, 2nd in offensive rating, 1st in net points, 3rd in opponents' points per game, 2nd in points per game. They're just really, really flowing on all sides of these games, and they're not super dominant against the spread. And so if you see that and maybe say, oh, it's a double digit spread, I'm not quite sure. When they've been double digit spreads this season, which has been twice, they're 2-0. And you look at this Liberty team that has been up and down. They're starting to play a little bit better. They're actually 8-8 against the spread. I just don't see them as being, as complete of a team as Connecticut. And so, again, coming off of that really, really tough loss against Seattle, I don't think that they're gonna have the offense to keep up with the Sun tonight. So I'm gonna take Connecticut -10.
It's hard to argue because Connecticut, when they are rolling, and Jones has been terrific, especially in her last couple games, aside from the bad loss to Washington. When they're rolling, I would completely agree with you. It's the Aces and it's the Sun, and those are the top two teams. Now, I think you can make an argument that the Sky have put themselves in that top tier with that comeback win on the road, and so maybe you're looking at those three teams as among the best in the WNBA. The issue that I have with the Sun, and part of the reason that I'm going on the total instead, is there's a part of me that just doesn't trust them sometimes, especially at home. They tend to have these letdown games. And if you look at what the Liberty have done since June, this might surprise you. And they're the number one net rated team in the month of June after being dead last in the month of May. Like, give them a ton of credit. They've really turned their season around. And so the number to me felt like, yeah, of course, the Sun, when they're playing at their best, should absolutely demolish the Liberty. But at the same time, like, this is a team that's all of a sudden started to figure some things out, and they've been much more competitive in the month of June.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm looking at them, and there's a clear trend in that, like, they started off the season, and they actually started off the season with a win against Connecticut, but then they lose. What is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They lose about 7 straight, and so since then they've been 2 wins up, one loss there. Listen. I can't get out of my head that they're not a great team. And so I think that Connecticut is going to be able to put a little bit more defensive pressure on them rather than the pressure that New York is going to be able to put on Connecticut. And so at the end of the day, I think the Sun are still going to be able to eke this one out. Listen, it was a close game against Seattle, and the Liberty still ended up losing by 8 or 9 points.
I think it was a 9-point loss.
Yeah, it was a 9-point loss. We're right on that line. I think Connecticut is better than Seattle, and obviously it's not just like a 1-to-1 ratio like that, but still, right. Like there's things that Connecticut can do to kind of blow this game open, and I think that they get it done tonight.
So I'm glad you brought up the pressure from Connecticut, because I am on the under. Shocking. Another Ben pick on the under for a WNBA game. That worked out so well between the Sky and the Aces yesterday. The other plays hit. So everybody, relax, put down your feathers a little bit. Everyone just cool off. But I still like the under, even though we've seen this number move a ton from where it opened. I saw it at several books. Give WinBet, by the way, a lot of credit, because their traders were all over this number. So they opened at 162. I saw it at multiple other sports books at 159.5. And I thought to myself, like, okay, so I already like the under here. I'm going to go ahead and take it on this better number. Now it's available everywhere at 163. So I might be on the wrong side, but let me tell you at least why I'm still going with the under at that particular number. So Connecticut and really both teams had pretty bad offensive efforts in their last game, especially Connecticut. They put up 63 points. Granted, it was against the Mystics on the road. That's the number one rated defensive team in the WNBA. But like, defense is their calling card. And I know that both teams are going to probably play a little bit better offensively, especially Connecticut. But again, we talked about the Liberty being the best net rated team in the WNBA. And they've been a good defensive team pretty much most of the season. Ever since that awful start to the year, they've really turned it around, and it started on the defensive end before they started to get their offense in a little bit more rhythm. So the Sun can put up points, but both of these teams also rank in the bottom half in pace. Again, Connecticut, from a net rating perspective, is also a top 5 team in the league. I think the Liberty want to go in and kind of just slow Connecticut down. And again, they're not going to run that much faster. But again, if their scoring is really efficient, then they're going to play good defense on the Liberty, and the game's going to be over right from the get-go anyway, and your pick hits and my pick hits. So I know that the odds makers, I know that a lot of the sharps have moved this number quite a bit, but I still think 162 is just a tad bit too high for teams that play a little bit slower, that also use defense as their calling card tonight. So yeah, the number has moved in the opposite direction of where I would like it to go, but I still think the under is in play at 162. I'm not going to overreact to a 3.5 point swing.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that this under finally comes in, because you and I, we need an under to hit. Last night was not a great night for us. I think we took an under in every game except for the Dream.
Yeah, but Dream money line hit, so that was a win for both of us.
It did, but Mystics and Sparks under missed. Sky Aces hit. That one missed as well. We had a lot of misses. So this one I like it though.
Here's what I think. I think we're going to be ahead of the trend heading into the second half. I'm just going to say that, like, these numbers are going to eventually start to come down a little bit, and we'll be ahead of it. And if you guys are watching us, hopefully you're ahead of it with us as well. So let's go over our best bets of the night. And again, coming up in just a minute, we're going to dive into the AL Central, and we got the game of the night between the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Colorado Avalanche for Game 4 coming up in about 10 minutes or so to break that down. So on Donovan's side, he's going over for Charlie Morton strikeouts, and also on the other side of that game, he's looking at the over for Carlos Rodon for the San Francisco Giants at 7.5. Also in the WNBA game of the night, he likes the Connecticut Sun, 10-point favorites tonight against the New York Liberty, as Connecticut and New York battle in a tri-state rivalry. My best bets of the night, I like the over for Tristan McKenzie for strikeouts for the Cleveland Guardians. I also like the Giants as a road dog tonight in Atlanta. And the under, yet another under, 162 between the Liberty and the Sun. If you have not bet that game yet, good news for you. If you are looking to tail on the under, it is now listed at 163 almost everywhere across the board. So if you're thinking under, you have a very good chance to be able to go ahead and get an even better number. All right, Donovan, let's talk a little baseball as we go in and start to have sort of an outside look when it comes to trying to evaluate what's happening in the AL Central right now. So if we take a look at the standings, the Minnesota Twins and the Cleveland Guardians are now tied at the top of the Central. Cleveland's 35-28, Minnesota 38-31, and the White Sox are 33-34. Cleveland's been on a great streak. They're 8-2 over the last 10 games. They have the best run differential in the AL Central, plus 36. But the White Sox have been that team that's been immediately projected at the beginning of the season to win the division. That's been taken over by the Twins for consensus odds. And right now, a lot of the Fangraphs and Pacoda projections at Baseball Prospectus still believe that it is the Twins' division to lose. So before we dive into which team we actually feel is best suited to win this division, when you kind of just take an overall look at the state of the AL Central, what in particular maybe stands out to you? Is it the fact that Chicago continues to underperform? Maybe the Twins or the Guardians are overperforming in your book? Bird's eye view of the division, what stands out to you maybe the most?
I think the biggest thing for me is the White Sox and the fact that they have underperformed this year. Now they have, they've gotten back on track. They're at 500 now, but this was a team coming into the season that I thought was going to be in contention for the pennant, and I thought that they were going to be a team that was going to go toe to toe. I think I had them and the Astros playing, in the ALCS and the winner of that going to the World Series. So seeing them kind of get caught up on themselves early on, and they've had a little bit of noise surrounding them, but that's kind of been like surprising for me. But at the same time, they're still completely in this race, right? We can end up midway through June, coming out of midway through July, a couple weeks after the All-Star break, and they have the lead in the AL Central. They're 3.5 games back, and so we're in June. We haven't even reached the middle point of the season, and how baseball seasons go. It's a long grind, and you have one hot week of baseball, you get 5-6 games in a row, and now you're back up there. So I think that Chicago is still in a pretty decent spot to make a run, but they have been very surprising in terms of how they've underperformed.
They've, for a team that's supposed to be led by Tony La Russa, Hall of Fame baseball person, as he likes to describe himself. They've kicked around the baseball almost as much as anybody. Their bullpen, which is also supposed to be a strength of his, being able to maneuver and find the right pitching matchups, has really struggled. Now, they've also dealt with some injuries, and Liam Hendricks, their closer, came out the other day and basically said, like, yeah, I've been playing with an injured UCL since 2008. And if you're a White Sox fan, you're thinking to yourself, like, really? Like, this is coming out right now, 14 years later? Like, you couldn't have at least gotten that conversation going. So you're right. They've underperformed vastly. And taking a look at some of their latest playoff odds, and I really like the one over at Fangraphs. The White Sox still are the team that is projected to win the division. Their division odds come in at 41.9%, and then the Twins at 29.2%, and the Guardians at 28.8%. The White Sox, part of the reason is they have the easiest strength of schedule remaining. Their strength of schedule for all three of those teams is just below 500, but the White Sox have about a 0.25 difference in percentage. So keeping all of that in mind, knowing that the Twins have gotten off to this really good start, knowing that the Guardians, led by their pitching staff, have put themselves in a really good situation, Jose Ramirez having an MVP caliber season, I ask you, of all three teams, if you had to lay a bet on who is winning the AL Central Division, who would be that team for you?
I would go with the Guardians. I really like Cleveland, and I like what they've been doing lately. And our guy Joe Summers, he's been all over it. Him and Peter Dewey, they've both written several stories over at BetSided about why the Guardians are the bandwagon to jump on, and why their odds still have a lot of value. Once we're getting into late June. But if you look at the Guardians, they've won 8 of the last 10. They've really turned it around, and they've gotten their bad start out of the way. And it's kind of the same thing. Them and the Twins have kind of been the same way, except a little flipped. The Guardians had their bad start. Now they're starting to recover. The Twins started off hot, and now they're starting to regress a little bit. With the White Sox, and the one thing that scares me a little bit about them, and even though that I said that they're in a really good position to make a run, if you look at the standings, and if you break it down, the Guardians are 16-10 at home. The Twins are 20-15. The White Sox are 15-17. They're not getting the job done at home as well as you would like them to.
Yeah.
And if you're going to start winning these games, and you're going to start going on these runs, and you want to be a really good, playoff team, you're going to have to win games at home, and they're just not doing that. So that's one of the reasons that's, kind of scaring me about them. But if we look at, at Cleveland, they are really, really finding their stride, and they're hitting on all cylinders right now. And I don't see them falling back to where they were at the beginning of the season. And so I think that even if they, come back to earth a little bit, they're still going to be in the driver's seat in the AL Central. I think Minnesota can tick up a little bit, but if I had to, if I was making my bet right now, I would put it on Cleveland.
You know what? Joe and Peter, give them their due. Yeah, they've
swayed me. They've swayed me.
You know who else jumped on the Cleveland Guardians bandwagon last Friday? This guy. Put a little something on them at 100-1 to win the World Series. Put a little more on them to win the AL pennant at 40-1. Put even more on them at plus 450 to win the AL Central. And now they're in first place. Now, I realize that by making a statement like that, it's immediately going to just blow up right in my face, and everyone can laugh at me, especially White Sox and Twins fans, once they inevitably go on some sort of a 7-game losing streak. But from the perspective of them doing a really good job of stringing hits together, they've been really clutch throughout the course of the season. One of the better late inning teams in baseball scoring runs. Back of the bullpen is good. The rotation, especially as Shane Bieber started to go along in the season. Remember, he got off to a rough start. Everyone was freaking out about him, that his fastball was several miles per hour lower than what we'd seen out of him in previous years, that maybe he had a case of dead arm. He's starting to get himself back on track. They have a strong rotation and a good back of the bullpen and a lineup filled with guys that are going to put the ball in play, and a really good manager in Terry Francona. That's not to say that the Twins don't have the ability to be able to contend in that division. You look at Baseball Prospectus's PECOTA projections. They have the Twins, not the White Sox, as the team now with a 61% chance to win that division. The Guardians, based on most calculations, are still that third place team. But I buy into what they're selling right now. I buy into Jose Ramirez having that MVP type year, that on opening day, they went ahead and said, you're going to be that franchise player for us. We're going to lock you in long term. It kind of set everybody at ease. And after he got some of those jitters out of the way and the team got through, like you said, some of those early season struggles, they're now back to playing really solid baseball. And I absolutely buy in this team, especially with the depth in their pitching staff. And that's what Cleveland's done for a long time, is they develop pitchers. I buy in. I'm buying on them to be able to go ahead and make a difference and be that team that maybe wins this division by a game or two.
Yeah. And you said the fact that they are able to put the ball in play as consistently as possible is fantastic, because they're not a one-trick pony. Like, you're not looking at what they're doing offensively and say, oh, this is just juiced up, or they're just hitting the ball really well, right? Across the board, they're kind of, right outside the top 10 and up in a lot of the major categories when we're talking about hits per game, RBIs per game. They strike out. They average the least amount of strikeouts per game. And at the same time, while this isn't a stat to like brag about, they're 27th in the league in home runs per game. But you look at that and you say, okay, well, they're still creating offense everywhere else. They can still go and manufacture offense the old-fashioned way and kind of get it in like a small ball kind of way. So offensively, I like their tactics and I like what they do, and the fact that that they are putting the ball in play, that they're not striking out and they're not swinging and missing and being overly aggressive. That's a really good sign moving forward.
Yeah, so very much a lot of intrigue coming out of this division. Obviously, as the season goes on, we'll continue to monitor it and break it all down over at BetSided. Should be a fascinating trade deadline for a lot of those three teams as well, knowing that it's going to be a fight probably till the very end. And we'll see whether or not the White Sox can start playing up to their potential, despite Tony La Russa being on the bench. So fascinating divisional race between those three teams that we're very excited to follow along the rest of the way. But let's transition, Donovan, into the game of the night. Game 4 of the Stanley Cup Final this evening over in Tampa Bay. Big win for the Lightning in Game 3. They finally got off the schneid, scored 6 goals, third consecutive over that hit, and the current odds right now are backing the this has actually changed. So at one point it was the Lightning at minus 115, but that has changed. It is now the Avalanche that are slight favorites on the road in Game 4 at minus 115. Lightning come in at minus 105. If you are going to bet on the puck line, however, you're going to have to lay it with Tampa Bay. -1 at plus 145. If you want to take the Avalanche, you can get them at +1 and minus 175. And the total right now is sitting at 6 goals. As I mentioned, the over is hitting 3 consecutive games, with more of the juice leaning towards the under at minus 120. So before I get your pick on the game, Donovan, I just want to mention something that I found really interesting about how odds makers are viewing the series right now. So if you look at WinBet, who they think to win the series and who will be the Stanley Cup champion, they have the Avalanche up 2-1 in the series at minus 310 and the Lightning at plus 250. What I found really interesting, and we wrote about it over at BetSided, is that they also are offering exact score odds, which means for the series, you can either bet, say the Lightning to win in 7 games. They win 4-3, and that's at plus 525. Maybe you think the Avalanche win in 6 games. That's at plus 250. Do you know what the prediction is, Donovan, for what odds makers think is most likely to happen in this series?
I would say Avalanche in 7.
No, you would be incorrect. It's the Avalanche in 5. The Avalanche in 5 come in at odds of plus 220. That is the lowest odds on the board for remaining series prices, which is an indication that they think Colorado is more likely to win tonight, steal one in Game 4 on the road, and then go ahead and win the series once they return back to Colorado. So I don't know about you. I'm curious to hear your pick, But that certainly stood out to me in trying to weigh where I wanted to go with tonight's game. But who do you like? Are you on the side? Are you on the total? What is your best bet for game 4 of the Stanley Cup final tonight?
Okay, so I'm siding with the Lightning first off. I think that they tied the series up. The reasoning is has nothing to do with stats because it's the exact same reason that I faded the Rangers the entire, last series. I'm really just going off of they got that dog in them, and like that's really all I'm going off of tonight. And because if you look at the numbers at like the high danger scoring chances in this series, Colorado has 30 of them, and Tampa Bay has 18. If we're going for expected goals scored, Colorado has 6.1. They're averaging 6.1 expected goals per game. Tampa Bay is at 3.4. It it hasn't really been close in terms of like statistically how much Colorado's is outplaying Tampa Bay. But I see a team that even though that they haven't played well, game one went into overtime. They were down 3-1 and were able to fight and claw back into that game and get there. Obviously, game two they get blown out, but you come back to game three and you get the win in a big fashion on your home ice. I think they can get the same thing done tonight, and it's probably not going to be a 6-2 game. I think that if they do win, it'll probably be something like 4-2. So listen, exact score prediction for tonight too. Take the
Look at that.
Lightning 4-2 to tie this series up. I just think that their championship grit is gonna show up. I think Vasilevsky is gonna have a really good game, and they're gonna get it done.
So, in the interest of transparency here, I wrote about the latest movement in the series odds over at WinBet and mentioned at the time, this was yesterday afternoon, that based off the numbers alone, I think it's worth jumping on the series price for Tampa Bay, whether you like them in 6 games at plus 750. If you like them to win the series in 7 at plus 525. I think from a value perspective, for a Tampa team that's won, I think, 8 consecutive games in their home arena after losing the first, that's played really, really well, that's won 11 consecutive Stanley Cup playoff series. Like, it's more than enough to see this team, who, mind you, was down 2-0 in their previous series to the New York Rangers, ended up winning 4 straight games in 6 to be able to knock off the Rangers and play Colorado in the Stanley Cup final. Like, from a numbers perspective, that's the best value on the board. However, man, like, to think Colorado, based on where the odds makers have set and moved these lines, to say that they basically expect the Avalanche to not only win tonight, but to win the series in 5 games. I got to be honest, like, I think that's gotten into my head a little bit. And I think they're expecting a bounce back from Colorado, who up until game 3 had been undefeated and actually played their best hockey of the Stanley Cup playoffs on the road. Now, one thing that I wonder, whether or not it's going to be a possibility of Nazem Kadri coming back for game 4. There's a possibility that he could come back tonight. And we're also not sure which goaltender we're going to see for Colorado. Is it going to be Darcy Kemper, who got pulled, or is it going to be Pavel Francouz? Francouz has actually had 2 shutouts in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Kemper's only had 1. And while Kemper's been good, he's just been up and down. And Francouz is 6-0. His goals against average is 2.81. He's been really good in the playoffs. And especially after Kemper went down, he was locked in the rest of the series against one of the better offenses in Edmonton in the NHL. So I almost think by going to Francouz here, he's going to be that backup goaltender Disney-style story where he comes in, makes the difference. And I think the odds makers recognize that. They see where some of the money has started to come in. And I see this going one way, even after I thought initially this would be the Lightning series to be able to get back into the mix. So yeah, I do think Colorado ends up winning tonight. I'll take them on the money line.
I like that. Well, I don't like that. I like the reasoning, and I could see the vision. I see the logic behind it. I still just think that when Tampa Bay is locked in defensively, I think they're going to be able to do a couple things and maybe slow down Colorado a little bit.
Yeah.
Colorado's played this really up and down, wide open style kind of all season long. And last game, when they were able to be slowed down and they only scored 2 goals, then you see the other side where Tampa Bay takes control. So if they can do that again and maybe slow this game down a little bit and not let Colorado get out, then I really do like them in this game.
Before we get out of here, a couple comments that weigh in on. Appreciate our guys Cody and Nate checking in over on the board today. I know that Nate is taking a look at the Tampa Bay Lightning as well, so he's on your side, Donovan. But they were both talking about just a dynamite matchup between the Chicago Cubs trying to avoid the sweep at the hands of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Any thoughts on our sad Cubs today? Don't do this to yourself, Cody. Like, if you already watch them as a fan, don't even consider betting on them. It's not going to go well. I know that Nate is on board. He likes the fact that Keegan Thompson's on the mound. And yeah, that's one nice positive aspect of the season. But this is a team that's just giving up so many runs left and right. The Pirates have a little bit of momentum, bringing up O'Neal Cruz. They've won 2 games. And yeah, Thompson's been fine. But, I mean, if you really want to jump on board, I suppose you can. I just don't have a whole lot of faith in anything that Chicago is doing right now. I think the right management and David Ross is the right manager for the job, but this team has done no favors for them. They're going to be hardcore sellers at the deadline. Personally, it's a stay away, but if you want to jump on Keegan Thompson, I suppose I'm not going to talk you off that ship.
Go ahead and do it. Go ahead and do it, Nate. Cody, maybe emo heads a little bit. Just try to make sure make sure you leave with something. Don't just walk out, watch the game with nothing.
I was wrong, by the way. It is not for the sweep. They play a 11:35 Central Time game tomorrow, so 12:35 out in Pittsburgh, over at WinBet, and the Cubs are actually favored in both games. They are a -134 favorite tonight. Is Keegan Thompson. All right, you know what? If the odds makers aren't convinced that the Cubs blow as much as I think they do, then go ahead and jump on the Cubs money line. Keegan Thompson, 6-2, 3.27 ERA. I believe it's Jared Eichhoff. I haven't heard that name in a long time for the Pittsburgh Pirates. He's back on the mound today. So last year, he was 0-2 with an 8.69 ERA. So yeah, I'll take the guy that's 6-2 with a 3-something ERA over the guy from last year that's making his debut for the season. So there you go. That's my bold prediction of the night for the Cubs and the Pirates. But one thing that is not bold, Donovan, is a bold fact that we are with you every day, Daily Betslip, Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern. Tomorrow, you'll be back on the show with our guy Peter Dewey. It is NBA draft night, so I know you guys are going to go heavy into what might happen in the association. We might see some trades. We'll probably see the Sacramento Kings blow their pick at number 4, find a way to screw that up because that's what the Kings do. So excited to be able to watch that show with you tomorrow. Thanks to all you guys for hanging out with us today as well. Shout out especially to Nate and Cody. But before we go, we have to tell you who we're betting on tonight, don't we? As I jump the gun once again. The poll is in for the Stanley Cup Final, Game 4. Did the votes come across? Do we finally have a play on the total, or are we going back to a side? It's official, Donovan. We have an over on the game tonight, over at even money, +100. The people have spoken. They've seen the over hit in 3 straight. So the over on 6 goals, over for Game 4 between the Lightning and the Avalanche. How do you feel about that?
It kind of goes against my theory of what the Lightning had to do to win this game, but if they can, listen, if the Lightning can win in a shootout, anything's possible in this series. And especially if we get it to 2-2, you might have to start sprinkling on a lot of those, high value series prices. So I don't hate it. I don't hate it.
All right. Well, I like the fact that we can get an even money, and the community's been red hot with us over the last few days as well. So over 6 is the play for Game 4 of the Stanley Cup Final between the Lightning and the Avalanche tonight. Like I said, Donovan and Peter will be back tomorrow. Big shout out to Nate and to Cody and everybody weighing in on the chat. Also, thank you to Joanne Stoner Woodcock for joining us on the show, as well as our director and producer. For Donovan, I'm Ben. Appreciate you guys hanging out. May all of your best bets hit tonight. We'll do it again tomorrow, 5 o'clock Eastern. Be there, be square. Talk to you soon.